Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching you how to make a collared vest top. This concoction is a bit weird to describe, but a pleasure to wear. It's sporting a two-textured body featuring a slimming bottom ribbing, and the daintiest Suzette top section, and it's a sleeveless design so the arms are on full display. And there is the cutest collar to tie it all together. Speaking of, if you like seeing new and exciting crochet makes come together, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of the absolute cutest crochet tutorials and patterns online with new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado, for this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 100 grams of yarn, and that's 250 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 5.5 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite TV show that was made before the 2000s. My favorite show of all time is I Love Lucy, and that first aired in 1951. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is for size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook. Then we're all going to start by making an odd numbered chain starting 1 inch underneath our underarm to right underneath our chest. I need a total of 6 inches or 15 centimeters. So I'm going to make a chain of 25. So now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our Suzette stitch. So we're all going to start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And from here, into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to do a single and a double crochet. So bring your hook down. Into that chain, start with 1 single, and then into that same chain, a double crochet. So pull through 2, pull through 2. That is our first Suzette stitch set. Let's do this again. Now after every Suzette stitch set, we are going to be skipping that following stitch because that double crochet counts as that stitch. If we work into there, we're going to be accidentally increasing. So what we're going to do is skip that following stitch and then into the next, insert with a single, and then also with a double. That's our second set. Let's just do one more. Skip 1 stitch, into that following, a single, and a double. And that's it. We will continue to do our Suzette stitch set until we have 2 chains left. We are at the end of our row 1. We should have 1, 2 chains left, and now we're going to do an increase of 3 half double crochets. So all that's going to be is a yarn over, skip that second to last chain, and into that last chain insert with 3 half double crochets. So yarn over, pull through all 3. There's our first, into that same last chain with a second, and then into that same last chain with a third. Now numbers wise, we should have 2 more stitches than chains that we made, because we just did the increase. And now to do our row 2, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and now just do our Suzette stitch row all the way down, so no increases and no decreases. So into that first stitch, we're going to insert with a single and a double, skip that following, into the next, another single and a double, and that's basically it. We're going to continue to do our Suzette stitch until we have 2 stitches left, and just as a really quick tip, each of our Suzette stitches from here on out are going to be worked into our previous row's single crochet. So as a refresher, we are going to be skipping that following stitch, and we can tell that that is a double crochet from our previous row because it's a little bit taller than our following stitch. And then into the next, a single and a double. I'll meet you back when we have 2 stitches left. We are at the end of our row 2. We should all have 1, 2 stitches left, and all we're going to do, because we need the end of our even number rows to be blunt, is just half double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. And that is how we end off all of our even number rows. And we should have the same amount of stitches as our last row. Getting started on our following row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and it's going to be a repeat of rows 1 and 2, so let's just get started on that together. We're going to insert our hook into that first stitch with our first Suzette stitch set, skip a stitch, another Suzette stitch set, and then continue on until we have 2 stitches left. We are back and we have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished. Now we should have 1, 2 stitches left, and into that last stitch, since we are ending our odd number row, it's always going to end on an increase of 3 half double crochets. So insert 3 half double crochets into the last stitch. And now that our increase is finished, let's get started on our following row, which is our row 4. And like I said, for every even number row, we do not do an increase or decrease. So chain 1, flip our work, and then just start with our Suzette stitch set, and that's it. We're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until this underarm portion that we have can stretch from mid underarm over to the corner of our underarm. And then I'll meet you back right after an odd number row so we can get started on our shoulder right after that. Alright, so I am back with my underarm portion. I have a total of 5 rows, and my width is 2 inches or 5 centimeters. My height for my taller side is 8 inches or 20 centimeters. And now from here, we're going to make an even number chain that reaches all the way up to the top of our shoulders. So I needed just about 4.5 inches or 11 centimeters, so I made a chain of 20. And now we're going to do our Suzette stitches all the way back down. So block off that last chain and do a chain 1. So into that chain that we blocked off, insert your hook with a single and a double crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue with our Suzette stitch all the way down until we reach the end of the row. We're going to continue with our Suzette stitch until we have 2 stitches left, and then close off the row with a half double crochet. And keeping in mind that once we reach the body portion, each of our sets are going to be worked into our previous row's single crochet still to get the texture that we want. So our first shoulder row is all finished up. We made our way all the way down with our Suzette stitch. And when we had 2 stitches left, we just did a half double crochet into that last stitch to keep the end nice and blunt. Now for this shoulder portion, we are not going to be doing any increases or decreases. So at the end of the row, all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and then do our Suzette stitches all the way back up, remembering that once we have 2 stitches left, half double crochet into the last. We're going to continue to do our Suzette stitch row with no increases and no decreases until this shoulder portion can reach the base of our neck. And once we do, I'll meet you back right after an even number row, so along the bottom, so we can get started on the neckline. So we are back, and my shoulder portion is all finished. I have a total of 10 rows. My width is just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters. And now from here, we're going to get started on our neckline. So first things first, we're going to want to insert our stitch marker into any even numbered stitch from the top around where our collarbone is. Now I inserted my stitch marker into the 16th stitch from the top, and that's just about 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Now from here, since we're along the bottom, all we're going to do is make our way all the way up with our Suzette stitch until we are 2 stitches right before our stitch marker. Alright, so I have made my way all the way down, and I have 2 stitches left right before my stitch marker. And all we're going to do is keep this end blunt as well, so just yarn over, skip a stitch, and then half double crochet into that following stitch, which should be the stitch right before our stitch marker. And all we're going to do from here is repeat this Suzette stitch row, so with no increases and no decreases, we should have the same amount of stitches for every row until we reach the other side of the base of our neck. And then I'll meet you guys back right after an odd number row, so along the top, so we can get started on the shoulder portion right after that. We are back. My neckline is all finished, and I have a total of 27 rows, and my width is now 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters. And now from here, we're going to get started on our shoulder portion. So getting started on our second shoulder portion, we're all going to need to make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started with our neckline. So for those of you that have my numbers, I skipped a total of 16 stitches. So over here, I made a chain 16. And now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 does not count as a stitch. And then we're going to insert into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, with a Suzette stitch. And that's it. We're going to continue with our Suzette stitch, making our way all the way down. When we have 2 stitches left, put 1 half double crochet into that last stitch. And we're going to continue to do our Suzette stitch portion with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of rows that we have for our first shoulder portion. When we have those amount of rows finished up, we should all end up along the bottom, and I'll meet you back so we can get started on our underarm. I am back. My shoulder portion is all finished. I now have a total of 32 rows. My width is now 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters. And now we're going to finish this off with our underarm. So first things first, we're going to need to insert our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led all the way up to the top of our shoulders. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 20. So on this side, I inserted my stitch marker into the 20th stitch. And now from here, we're going to do our Suzette stitch all the way up until we are 4 stitches right before our stitch marker. So we've made our way all the way up until we had 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches right before our stitch marker. And now we're going to do a decrease of 3 half double crochets. But just to make sure that we're on the right track, if you would like to, we should have the same amount of sets as our last underarm row, so this one right over here. So what we're going to do from here is just yarn over, skip that following stitch, and then into the third, second to last, and then last, do a decrease. So skip that following stitch, into the next, insert, pull through, into the one right after that, pull through, and then into the one right after that as well, which should be the stitch right before our stitch marker, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook, and all we're going to do is yarn over, pull through all 5 of those loops, and that is our decrease. When we have that, we're going to do our following Suzette stitch row, because remember we only did an increase into every other row when we were getting started on our first underarm portion. So just chain 1, flip your work, and then make your way all the way down with our Suzette stitch. At the end of the row, making sure that we are ending it with a half double crochet because we need it to be blunt, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, get started on our following Suzette stitch row, leaving the last 4 stitches just so we can decrease together once more. So we are back with our underarm, and we should have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished. At the end of our third row, we should all have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches left. If it looks like we don't have 4 or we just have 3 stitches left, then you might want to turn your work over. It might be a little bit easier to count. So just to show you, here's my 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. And now we're just going to close it off like how we did for our first decrease row, which is a decrease of 3 half doubles. So yarn over, skip that following stitch into the third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, last, pull through. Should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook, so yarn over, pull through all 5, and that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of rows as our first underarm portion. When we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and if you would like to double check your work, the last row that we should have should be the same amount of stitches as chains that we made when we got started on our underarm. Once when everything is all adding up, go ahead and do a chain up of 1 and cut. So I am back. The entirety of my front panel is finished. I have a total of 37 rows. My width is just about 12 inches or 31 centimeters. And now from here, we're going to get started on the back panel, but the back panel is going to be done pretty much the same way as the front panel, but we are not going to have this big gap. It's just going to be worked Suzette stitch all the way across from our first row to our last shoulder row. I already have mine finished, so I'm just going to talk you guys through how to do it. So here is my back panel. It is going to be the same height, same width as the front panel, and we're all going to start by making the same chain that we made for the front panel, doing the same amount of rows for our increase. We're then going to make the same even number chain that led up to our shoulder, and then from there, do our Suzette stitches all the way across until we have the same amount of rows as our last shoulder row with no increases and no decreases. Then finish off our back panel with the same underarm that we just did together with a chain up of 1 and cut right after. And we should end up with the same amount of rows. Once we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you back so we can seam everything together. So we are back. Both our front and back panel are finished, and now we are ready to seam our shoulders together. So what we're going to want to do is place our front panel on top of our back panel. It doesn't matter the placement since the front and the back of each panel look the same. So we're just going to place it, insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, and we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook. Then we're going to pull our yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And what we're going to do from here is a single crochet row connecting our front and our back panel at the same time. And we're going to be alternating between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, starting with 1 single crochet. So let's all start by finding our first side row. This is mine right here. We're going to find that top loop and insert into that top loop within the front panel. Find the same first side row within the back panel, insert into that top loop within the back panel, and single crochet that together with just 1 single crochet. Now into our following side row, this is mine right here, we're going to be doing 2 single crochets. So into that top loop, go ahead and insert your hook. Find that same side row within the back panel, this is my second side row right here. Find that top loop, insert with a single crochet. And like I said, we're going to be doing 2 single crochets, so 1 more into that same gap that we did for both the front and the back panel. So insert into the front, insert into the back. It should be a little bit easier since it should already be gathered, and single crochet. And that's pretty much it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into within the front panel. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So we are back. We have just finished up seaming the shoulders on both sides, and now we're going to seam the sides. So what we're going to do is make sure that our seam is still flipped wrong side out. So the seam that we just finished for the shoulders is along the outside still. And then we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of the front and back panel. Go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now we're going to do another single crochet seam connecting both our front and back panel together until we don't have any more stitches left. So we're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert. Find that first stitch into the back panel, insert your hook in through there. And if you're like me, if you have a tail end and don't want to weave it in later, go ahead and place that over your hook and single crochet everything together. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, next stitch into the back panel, and single crochet, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed together, what we're going to do next is the bottom of our piece. So let's all flip our work right side out now, meaning all of our seams are along the inside. And then we're going to be inserting our 5mm hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom. Next, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now all we're going to do is alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, making our way all the way around. So pretty much the same way that we did our shoulder seam. So let's all start by finding our first side row. Now this is my first side row right over here. I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook, and if you'd like to weave in your tail ends as you go, place your tail end over your hook and single crochet. This is my following side row. Quick tip, as you guys can see, I have a big gap right here. If your first side row was this gap, that's completely fine as well. What we're going to do is insert our hook in through there with 2 single crochets. So there's 1, into that same gap, there's 2. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around. And when we don't have any more side rows left to work into, slip stitch into that chain space. Now a really quick tip is this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this piece can stretch. So once our single crochet row is finished, go ahead and try it on. And if it's a little bit too tight, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. So our single crochet row along the bottom of our piece is finished. Next thing we're going to start working on is the length of the bottom portion of our piece. So first things first, we're going to need to switch out to our 5.5mm hook. That's going to give us a little bit more stretchiness when it comes to the bottom. And then we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the entirety of the piece to be. So you can make this cropped or long. I'd like for mine to be full length, and I need a total of 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters. So I'm going to make a chain of 45. So now that we have our chain, what we're going to do from here is a half double crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 does not count as a stitch, that's our turning chain, and we're going to yarn over. And into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, we're going to insert with, if I can get it in, a half double crochet. There we go. So pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do just one more. Yarn over into that following chain, insert, pull through all 3. And we're going to continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. So we have made our way all the way down with our half double crochet row, and now we're going to connect it into the base. Now the ribbing that we're going to do isn't reversible, so we're going to want to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out and that we're working to the left or clockwise. Then we're going to start by counting up the next 2 available stitches. So here's 1, here's 2. Into that second stitch, we're going to insert our hook with a slip stitch to close off our row 1, and that slip stitch does not count as a stitch, we just needed to do that to connect it. And now to work our way up to the following row, which is a back loop slip stitch row, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base that also does not count as a stitch, and we're going to flip our work. Now from here, let's all start by finding our last stitch from our previous row. We're going to insert our hook into that back loop only, then we're going to yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, into that next stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything, and that's it. We're going to continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch to reach the end of the row, remembering not to tug too tightly, otherwise the following row is going to be a little too tight to work into. So we've made our way all the way down with our back loop slip stitch row, and now our following row is going to be a back loop half double crochet row. So let's all chain 2 and flip our work. So let's all yarn over, find the last stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop with a half double crochet, and that's it. Continue with 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and I will meet you back at the base just once more. So we are back, and we have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished. We're just going to connect it into the base together once more. So all we're going to do, since we're connecting our half double crochet, is count up 1, 2 stitches into that second stitch, insert with a slip stitch just like before, and that slip stitch still doesn't count as a stitch. And just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch up to that following stitch, flip our work, and then do our back loop slip stitch row. And that's pretty much it. We're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows with no increases and no decreases until we make our way all the way around. Well, we don't have any more stitches left to work into. I will meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We have made our way all the way around with the bottom portion of our piece, and now we're going to seam everything together. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out because we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam to make it look like an extra slip stitch row. So what we're going to do is insert our hook into that first available stitch into the front panel's front loop. So finding that first available stitch, we're going to insert into that front loop only, and then into that first available stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop only. Then when we have those 3 loops, we're all going to yarn over and pull through all 3. Let's do this just one more time. Into that next available stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next available stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, and pull through all 3, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way down. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So our bottom is all seamed up, and now we're ready to get started on the collar. Before we get started on the length of our collar, we're going to need to find our 2 middle stitches, one within the front panel and one within the back panel. As you guys can see, I've already inserted my stitch marker into the back panel one, and I'm just going to show you guys how to find the front panel one, and it's going to be done the same for the back. So all we're going to do is find that first side row for the neckline within the front panel. It should be one of these gap rows right here, and then we're going to find the last side row, which should also be a gap row. And all we're going to do is count 1 stitch at a time until we reach the middle, and we should all have just 1 middle row. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then this gap row is mine. So into my 9th side row for my front, and it should be the same for the back, so go ahead and insert your stitch markers into there. So now that we have our stitch markers inserted into place, we're now going to get started on the collar of our piece. So inserting our 5.5 millimeter hook, making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to insert it into any one of the side rows that we have along the back of our neckline. Go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row. And we're just going to continue that, making our way all the way around. So just to do the first one, this is my first side row, insert with a single crochet, and again into that next stitch, insert with another single crochet. And that's basically it. We're going to continue this, making our way all the way around. Once we reach the front panel, Like making our way down our shoulder, we should have some regular stitches to work into, so just one single crochet goes into each of those. But I will meet you back once we meet one of our stitch markers, just to remind you that we are going to be inserting our stitch marker into that stitch because we still need to know where our middle stitches are. So I've made my way down to my stitch marker within my back panel. I'm going to take my stitch marker out, and then into that side row I'm going to insert with one single crochet. I'm going to insert my stitch marker back into that top stitch just so I know where that's at, and then continue with one single crochet into every stitch. And don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that middle stitch that we make within the front panel as well. Make your way all the way around, and then slip stitch into that chain space and do a chain up of 1 and cut. So now that we've single crocheted along the entirety of our neckline, we're now going to get started on the collar. So making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to be inserting our 5.5mm hook into our stitch marker stitch within the front panel. We're then going to insert our yarn onto our hook and pull through. And we're going to start by making a chain the length that we'd like for the front of our collar to be, because keeping in mind it's going to get just a little bit shorter the further back it goes. So I would like for mine to be just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 12. So now that we have our chain, we're going to do a half double crochet row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That chain 2 does not count as a stitch, and we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook, with a half double, and we're going to continue down with our half double crochet row until we have 2 chains left. So we are back, and we should have 2 chains left. Into those last 2 stitches, we're going to do a decrease of 2 half double crochets. So go ahead and insert, pull through, and then into that last chain as well, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4, and we're now going to slip stitch it into the base. So just into that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch. And to work our way up to the following row, go ahead and slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and we're going to start the following row with a decrease of 2 as well. So yarn over, find that last stitch from our previous row, pull through, into that following stitch's back loop, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 4, and then put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and then at the end of the row, chain 2, flip our work, put 1 back loop half double into every stitch, leaving the last 2 once more to do a decrease, then connect it together. So we are back, and we should all have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished, and into the last 2 stitches of our row 3, we're going to do a decrease. So yarn over, into that second to last stitch's back loop, pull through, into that following stitch's back loop, which should be the last one, pull through for 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4, and now we're going to connect it into the base. So just into that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch, and then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. None of these slip stitches count as a stitch. Flip our work, and then repeat our 2 previous rows until this shrinks down to a width that we'd like for the collar to be. And then I'll meet you back along the base so we can move on with the rest of our collar. So I am back, and I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. And now that I've ended along my base, and this is the width that I'd like for my collar to be, we're going to continue on with our back loop half double crochet rows, but now without any of the decreases. So we're just going to continue this, connecting it into the base the same way that we just did, making our way all the way around until we reach our stitch marker. So just to do the first one, since we're along the base, we are going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base to work our way up, flip our work, and then just put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch, and that's it. Once we meet our stitch marker within the back, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I am back, and as you guys can see, I have made my way all the way around with my collar, and I have actually done the other side of my collar as well. So just to let you guys know, I did make my way over to my stitch marker within the back panel and did a chain up of 1 and cut. And then all I did was repeated everything that we did here on the other side until we reached our stitch marker. But for the second one, don't do a chain up of 1 and cut, so we can just work straight into the seam from there. But once we have both sides all finished up, all we're going to do is sandwich them together and do a single crochet seam. So all we're going to do is find that first stitch into the front panel, first stitch into the back panel, and single crochet everything together. Let's do one more. First stitch into the front, next stitch into the back, and single, And that's it. Continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. So we are back. We have finished up seaming our collar, and we're just going to clean up our armholes, and then we're going to be all done. So what we're going to do is make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to be inserting our 5mm hook into the stitch that's nearest to our side seam. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and now working up our underarm, we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochet into every side row. So this is my first side row right here. I'm just going to find that top loop and single crochet once, find my following side row and single crochet twice. And we're going to continue this until we reach the shoulder portion. The shoulder is going to be 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up and over. And then once we reach our shoulder portion on the other side, continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets. Slip stitch into that chain space, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. I am back. I have just finished up single crocheting along both of our armholes, and we're done. Last thing we're going to have to do is weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoy the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch y'all on the next one. Bye!